Good evening, I'm Eugene Chan and welcome to Straight Talk. Our guest is Secretary for Security, Mr. Chris Tang. With a career that began in 1987 as an inspector in the Hong Kong Police Force, Mr. Tang rose through the ranks, serving as Commissioner of Police from 2019 before assuming his current role. He has had extensive experience in criminal investigation, international liaison, and operation command. In this episode, we seek insights from Secretary Tang on the proposed enactment of Article 23 on how it will make Hong Kong a better place. Welcome, Chris.
Hi, Eugene.
Chris, as the former Commissioner of Police and also the Secretary for Security since 2021, you have actually played a very important role in maintaining Hong Kong's law and order. Could you share with our viewers how your transition from ensuring the day-to-day order to now security policy making, how that has influenced your outlook on the importance on the enacting of Article 23?
Right, so I think first of all, why we need to enact Article 23. First of all, this is a constitutional responsibility, i.e. Under basic law and also the national security law, we have to enact our own security law. And yet there is a practical need. I think as a Commissioner of Police, in particular during 2019 to 2021, I have seen sufficient evidence that there are external interference and there are a lot of national security risks that we are facing. So there's a practical need to enact Article 23.
So, Secretary, what you're saying that you were in that position and you know exactly what happened.
Yes.
So I would say your insight is very unique in this position.
I have been witnessing how these national security threats has been actually influencing Hong Kong.
Right. And Hong Kong people know that the national security law came into effect on the 30th of June 2020. And that has actually changed our state of society from chaos to order. So why do you believe we still need to enact Article 23 now? I'm sure many of you are going to ask you.
I think first of all, when you look at the national security law, there are basically 4 offences, right? But under Article 23, we are constitutionally bound that we need to enact 7 areas of law. I think 2 of that laws, that is secession and subversion, which has already been included in the national security law. But there are still 5 areas that we need to enact our own law, i.e. on treason, on seditions intention, and also theft of state secret, and also the prohibition of overseas political organizations and local political organizations.
Right, Secretary, we always hear this term constitutional responsibility. So what does it mean, and how important is it for the government to actually follow this through?
It means that under the Constitution, we have to enact our own law, i.e. under the Basic Law, Article 23, and also under the National Security Law, that we are required to enact our own national security law. Because when you look at the National Security Law, it is enacted by the central government and implemented in Hong Kong under Schedule 3. But Article 23, we are now enacting our local law.
Right. Chris, and we often hear the word 528 decision and also the national security law as well. I mean, what exactly is 528 decision? What actually happened and why do we have some sort of follow-up action needed?
All right. So as I said, Article 23, that we have to enact law on 7 areas, right? But in fact, apart from enacting the law on the remaining 5 areas, under the 528 decision, we have to enhance our own legal system as well as our enforcement mechanism so that we will be in a better position to safeguard our national security.
And also another area that people talk about, apart from constitutional responsibility, apart from this 528 decisions, is actually they talk about the word forward-looking. I think all laws should be implemented or enacted so that it covers all the areas. Why does it still have to be forward-looking?
All right, so in fact, let me elaborate a little bit, right?
Yes.
So in fact, in the Article 23, there are 4 basic principles. Right? The first one is there's a constitutional responsibility and there's a practical need. And the second principle is we not just to enact the remaining 5 areas of law, we have to implement the 5 to 8 as well. And the third one is it needs to be forward-looking. Forward-looking, it means that when we enact the law, because the threat that we are facing is ever-changing, but we cannot amend the law on every occasion, right? So, like for example, in the past, there's no mention about like use of computer or use of electronic system in facing like our national security threats, right? So in Article 23, we need to put things like this, and it will be a forward-looking, that is, we are able to handle the challenge in the future as well. And the last principle that in enacting Article 23, it need to be in line with the requirement on human rights.
Many people said that or concerned about this new law is going to restrict people's freedom. Is that true?
No, actually, it's wrong. We are here to safeguard the freedom of people. When you look at what happened in Black Cat violence in 2019, people holding different views with the mob will be assaulted and even set on fire. And without a safeguarding of your security, how can we speak freely? I mean, under Article 23, our freedom is safeguarded and we can speak out freely.
I'm sure that will be your plan, but how do you strike the balance between upholding national security law while maintaining, or as you said, upholding people's freedoms? How would you do that in the law?
All right, so first of all, no matter whether it's under basic law or national security law, and there's a section talking about the safeguard the human right, including our speech freedom and freedom of gathering, right? I think it will be the same under Article 23. But as I said, even under the two international covenants, and there's always a clause that in order to, for public order or for public safety or for national security or for the well-being or for freedom of others, there are always a restriction.
And just now you mentioned that when you were the police commissioner, you have seen what has happened. And I'm sure this is the reason why you would said that we need immediate action. Can you just elaborate just a little bit more? What are the main challenges do you think we will be facing, and how does this new law is going to mitigate the risk?
All right. So first of all, we look at the spirit of the law. Basically, it's to safeguard our security, in particular towards foreign interference. So in fact, the law is to protect the people of Hong Kong, including visitors. It's only prevent those people trying to endanger our national securities. So that's the reason why our law is only targeting a very small sector of people that they're trying to endanger our national security.
So Secretary, Regina Ip was here 3 weeks ago, and she made a very good comment. She said that the national security law only fills in the gaps of two offences, secession and subversion, as you mentioned. And then he was saying that if we had Article 23 in 2019, it would not have been necessary for Beijing to step in and introduce this national security law. Do you agree with that statement?
I would say it depends. Because, in 2003, the situation is totally different from now, and the threat that we are facing are totally different. So as you can see, the proposed legislation on this occasion is very different from 2003 because we are facing different threats.
Do you take much reference to the other jurisdictions' national security laws when you sort of proposing, when you think about drafting this Article 23?
In fact, we do. So in coming up with Article 23, what we are referencing, first of all, is what actually happened in Hong Kong. We also refer to our version in 2003, but of course, as I said, the threats are different. But of course, we are also referencing the relevant law of our own country and of other jurisdictions, in particular like the US, UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Singapore.
Right. How would you say that our law as compared to them? Are we more relaxed or are we even stricter?
I would say different country or different places or different jurisdictions, we are facing different threats. There's no such thing of more tight or more relaxed. It's appropriate and it's suitable to our own situation.
Right. Regina also said that he has been person of Article 23 for many years, and she said that actually the Article 23 enacted in Macau had changes last year. How would you compare our proposed legislation as compared to the Macau legislation, are we similar?
As I said, we try not to, exactly compare because different places have different challenge.
Right. Right. And some of the question was going to say that if you look at the consultation, some of the charges that can be laid against somebody who might have broken the law is very similar to the national security law. So in the future, if somebody might have, in breach of the law, so which charge would they lay? The national security law or Article 23? I'm sure many people are going to ask.
So probably you're referring to like the collusion with external forces in the NS law and also the external interference. But when you look at the element of the offence, they are different. There are fine difference between. But of course, when you look at individual circumstances, you have to see the actual evidence in hand, the circumstances of the case, and the seriousness of the offence, and then we can determine which charge should be laid. Actually, it will be the same. Like a robbery, someone carrying a firearm to do a robbery, you can charge him for illegal possession of firearm. You can charge him with robbery. But which charge finally will be laid, it will depends on the circumstances.
Right, Secretary, let's take a break now, and viewers stay tuned. We will be right back. Welcome back. Thank you, Chris, for talking to us about the pressing need for Hong Kong to enact Article 23, how this will affect everyday Hong Kong people. So, Secretary, in the first half, you have said very clearly that there's a pressing need for it because you were unique, that you went through a very tough time in Hong Kong, and you're saying that Hong Kong must have its own Article 23 that suits Hong Kong's situation as compared to other cities. I'm sure many viewers are going to ask you, or your friends, or even your supporters, even going to ask you that they are afraid that they could be held criminally liable for making negative remarks, even against our government, or even when they are sort of having a dialogue with the foreign correspondences, the foreign organizations. Is that true?
Actually, it's not true. So there may be some misunderstanding. Or there may be some, even they do understand, but they do it in purpose and trying to smear our law. So actually, there are a couple of areas that people may have concerns. First of all, it's about state secrets. People are thinking, if I do some research and the result of the research is not favorable to the government, will I be prosecuted? Of course not. When you look at the proposed law, for example, the element in state secrets, is first of all, you are disclosing something that you do not have a legal authority. And second, your disclosure is likely to endanger the national security. And the third element, it's the subject that you're talking about is relating to a specific category of circumstances. For example, relating to economic and social development, and relating to our defense, or relating to a major decision by the government or by the central government. Right? So only if you commit all these three elements, and yes, we need to have to prove your intention. So if you are not actually intending to do harm to our national security, you won't be like unintentionally commit the offense. There's no such things.
When you talk about state secrets, we are now in one of the most popular media station in Hong Kong. I'm sure some of them, for public interest, the media may have to reporting news of public interest per se. Will that consider a crime without a criminal intention?
So, as I said, you have to satisfy three elements, right? So the first one is whether are you disclosing something that you are without legal authority. The second one is to whether it will be likely to endanger national security. And yet you need to have the intention, right? So I think there are thousands of circumstances. It will be very difficult for me to say this one is a committing offense, this one is not. But when you put the facts against these three elements, it will be very easy to see whether you may have committed offense or not.
Right, so for everybody, let's be assured. What you're saying is Firstly, whether you have an intention to do something bad to the national security. And of course, it has to fulfill the other criteria you've mentioned.
Yeah.
Right. Another area people often like to talk about is regulation of organizations, especially foreign. So if there is a foreign organization in Hong Kong, say they have support from the government, which is very fair, and as an ordinary good citizen of Hong Kong, should we be refrained from having any connections with them?
Of course not. Probably you are referring to external interference.
Yes.
Again, in order to commit this offense, right, you need to fulfill 3 elements. First of all, whether you're collaborating with an external force. This is number 1. Mm-hmm. And number 2, it's are you using some illegal means or improper means? All right. And the third element, it's whether you will achieve a interference effect. Mm-hmm. So what it's improper mean? It means that like you're using violence, you are damaging property or trying to damage others' reputation, or you are knowingly, making false representation. Mm-hmm. And the interference effect will be like, it will be resulting in interfering our court decision, the running of the legislative council, or in election, or some major decision by CPG or by the government. So, and yet we have to prove your intent. So by just having some communication with overseas organization, even with a government one, if you are not using improper means, you're not using improper means, i.e. you are not using violence, you are not committing offense, nothing that you need to be worried.
Right, Secretary, the head of EU office here actually say he's concerned, particularly about the external interference that you have just described. And both Regina Ip and CY Leung have called for more efforts to explain to the new offences to the international community. Can you comment on that?
In fact, on different occasions, actually I met him as well. We have been doing a lot of explanation and clarification, including Consul General and including chambers of overseas commercial or business sector and also local one. And we have on various occasions explained the law and explained the position. Mm-hmm. But after our explanation, they all understand.
Right. And since you are onto that subject, some foreign business chambers or diplomats have voiced also the concern about the potential enforcement standards that could affect their nationals. So what would you say to reassure them?
I would say, as I said, the law, it's only targeting those trying to endanger our national security. So for visitors, for business people and the people of Hong Kong, they come here to enjoy their life, to do business. They are not come here to endanger our national security, and there's nothing for them to fear about.
Right. Right, Secretary, thank you for explaining all the myths about this proposed Article 23. Let's move back to our local consultation, which is going to end tomorrow. We all remember in 2003, the administration was criticized for not going with what we call white paper consultation before unveiling the actual draft law. But this time, a consultation has been released, but we haven't actually seen the law yet. So will you call this a genuine consultation because we haven't seen the law? And also, why is the public consultation period only lasted for 1 month?
I think on this occasion, the timing and also the weight of consultation, I would say it is appropriate. First of all, when you talk about whether it's too long or too short. I think on this occasion, in particular after 2019, people of Hong Kong do have consensus that we need to enact Article 23. There's a practical need. And also since the announcement that we're going to enact the law this year, there's a lot of people have expressed their opinion about Article 23. And in fact, on this consultation paper, we have incorporated a lot of views from different sectors to make up this consultation paper. And yet, I think the consultation paper do spell out a lot of key issues, although this is not exactly the bill, because I think how to write up the bills, I think it would be up to the professional people. Even I am not an expert in writing law. I'm good at making policies, right? But I'm not good at writing law. So I think we have to defer to those professionals to draft the law.
Right, Secretary. what are the responses in general from because you'll be receiving that every day, and I read in the news that close to 60% of the respondents support Article 23, and over 61% will say that it won't affect the media independence. So are you surprised that it's still 60%, despite what happened in 2019? And also, are there any concern from the business or even the legal sector?
I would say the consultation result is still analyzing. I'm not sure whether the figure you quote is correct or not. So let's wait for a little while to see the figure. Right? But from the interaction that I have during my various explanation forums, most of the people are supportive to the enactment of Article 23. Mm-hmm. And there are some concerns about what I've mentioned, like state secrets, like external interference, or like seditious intention, because they do not really understand and know about the law. So with our explanation, for the people that I've encountered, all of them, they're satisfied with our explanation and understand.
Well, Secretary, and we must also, apart from positive comments, we also look at the negative comments, especially those from overseas. Our former governor, Mr. Chris Patten, I'm sure he had made a lot of himself very clear. Why do you think they choose to see things the way and ignore the actual facts? And how can they actually claim they have the full picture? I mean, I want to ask your opinion. How will you convince them? Because they're coming from a very different angle.
Yeah, I understand that, there are people seeing things from different angles and in different positions. And as the chief executive always quote an example, like the enactment of Article 23 is like trying to build up a security lock against people burgle into our house. Mm-hmm. How can you expect someone that they're trying to burgle to our house to have positive comment on our lock?
Right. Okay. And also the director for Hong Kong Macau Affairs is in Hong Kong, Mr. Xia Baolong is in Hong Kong right now. Has he shown support to Article 23 or has he made any comments so far?
I understand his main purpose come here is talk about economy and also to talk about the district administration. Mm-hmm. Of course, he is, as a whole, he's being appreciated about the effort of what our government is doing. Mm-hmm.
Another thing that the chief executive and yourself have also said that this enactment will benefit Hong Kong economic freedom and development. So, in your view, will this make Hong Kong a better place, as the title of the show tonight?
Of course. I mean, security is a foundation for doing business. How can you, doing a business in a war zone, you won't invest in a war zone, right? So I think security is a basis for economic development. So that's very important.
Right. All right. Thank you, Secretary, for sharing your insight on this matter and highlighting the government's commitment to balancing security with preserving Hong Kong's freedoms. It is clear that enacting Article 23 will make Hong Kong a better place, as the Secretary said, and also free up all our energies to foster economic growth. As Tory Hayden, someone who works with children, said, safety is the most basic task of all. Without a sense of safety, no growth can take place. Without safety, all energy goes to defense. Have a good evening and see you next week.